welcome to all of you who are joining us from all over the world. My name is Mattie Bekink. I'm China Director of the Economist Intelligence Corporate Network, and I'm joining you today from Shanghai. The birds are chirping outside on a beautiful morning. I couldn't be more excited to be here because I am delighted to MC the SupChina Women's Conference. It's been an extraordinary year for the world, and today we'll hear from some of the world's top women leaders who are shaping US-China relations and beyond. Please remember that you can see the bios of all speakers on the website, and the link will be shared in the chat. Now, to get us started today, I'd like to introduce Anla Cheng, the founder and chair of the China Project, an independent news and business intelligence company focused on helping a global audience to understand China. The China Project produces journalism, conferences, and database tools that reach 2 million people every month. The China Project informs and connects a global audience regarding the business, technology, politics, culture, and society of China. The Women's Gala is their annual signature event. And with that, over to you, Anla.
Thank you so much, Mattie. I'm always so happy to see you and thrilled to have you as our MC today. And Mattie is coming in from China, so thank you so much. So good evening and good morning to all of you around the world. Welcome to our 7th SupChina Women's Conference. Day 1. It's my honor and privilege to welcome all of you this evening from New York to gather some of the most inspirational women leaders shaping Chinese and American businesses. At SupChina's Women Conference, powered by the China Project, our mission is to help the world understand China better. We cannot achieve our mission without the work and leadership of those of you here with us today. The US and China together will determine the future of the 21st century, and we are honored that our work and mission is recognized by so many of you. While our Women's Conference and Gala may be familiar to most of you, what you may not know is that we have just won our 6th award for being outstanding in our news coverage through our Daily Access, our Daily Dispatch newsletter, Signal, and our Sinica podcasts, and more. Please check us out and subscribe to our newsletters by going to our website, chinaproject.com. Tonight, you will hear experts speak on healthcare, technology, business, climate, and the environment, what is happening within their respective fields and its trends. We are honored to have the CEO of PepsiCo China to kick off our event. We are delighted to have as our MC Mattie Bekink, China Director at the Economist Intelligence Unit. We are thrilled to have Mattie to do a fireside chat with Chelsea Clinton as well and discuss work-life balance for professional women. I am heartened to know that all of us here today want to see more friendship and connections between our two countries. This evening is all about that, friendship and connection. Many have told me that this conference is the time when we are all empowered and inspired and energized by each other's accomplishments, strength, and courage. We aim to do just that. Thank you to all our sponsors with whom our work would not be possible. They include FD Gallery, BYD, Deloitte, Pillsbury, Freepoint Commodities, Cartier, Dorsey & Whitney, EY, Evergreen, KCY, JP Morgan, Kingdon Capital, UHY, Crescent Ridge, GCN, and Shirley and Walter Wong Foundation. We are excited to see many of you at our Black Tie Gala at the Mandarin Oriental in New York City tomorrow, where we will be honoring Stella Lee, BYD, Yuzha Wang, the global acclaimed pianist, Dora Fu Lee, award-winning and renowned artist, Amy Chua, a Yale professor and known for her best-selling book, The Tiger Mother. We are just about sold out, but if you get your tickets, I will personally try my best to squeeze you in. You can get tickets from our website. Go to our website and it will be at the top banner. Now, let's welcome back Mattie, who will introduce us to our keynote speaker. Enjoy the conference. Thanks, Mattie.
Thanks so much, Anla. I'm always inspired and energized by our conversations and by all that you're doing with the China Project. And in the spirit of friendship, I'm super delighted to introduce today's keynote speaker, Ansa, because not only is she a remarkable businesswoman, she's a friend here in Shanghai. Ansa is the president and CEO of Greater China for PepsiCo Inc., the world's leading food and beverage company with $23 billion brands, including consumer favorites such as Pepsi, Lay's, Quaker, and Gatorade. Ms. joined Pepsi in 2010 and has had several positions from VP of e-commerce to SVP and GM of Foods. Under her leadership, PepsiCo Greater China has achieved significant growth across multiple domain areas, from pioneering digitalization since 2012, ahead of the curve, and driving iconic innovations that propelled growth, step-changing brand penetration at all market tiers, to building future-backed culture and capabilities. So please welcome Anne. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Mattie, for the kind introduction. Good morning and good evening to everyone. It is my great honor to join this year's SupChina Women's Conference. I know there are more than 300 participants from all over the world, so what an exciting event. My greetings to everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to share with you some of my learnings that guided me well over the years, personally and professionally. So a bit about myself. I grew up in Hong Kong and started my career in consulting with McKinsey. And I was lucky to have quickly developed my passion in the consumer sector. I found it to be an industry that offered immense opportunities for insights and creativities. And that instant results in gratification to the right strategies and executions. And often it is against highly dynamic and fast-changing consumer trends and competitive landscapes. And certainly it is that case in China. Now, above all, what really energizes me most is how simple products and services, just designed according to basic human truth, when they're made accessible to and by millions of people, they can actually make a huge difference to their lives on a day-to-day basis. From some of the ingredient growers to our frontline workers and to the consumers as well. The fun just amplifies further when I have the privilege of leading PepsiCo Greater China, working with many of our billion-dollar brands and in a strategic market with massive growth and transformation opportunities. What a fun opportunity to lead a business like this. Now, over the years, we have built a powerful growth engine, created many iconic brands and innovations here in the market, led many industry-first transformations such as digitization, and nurtured a culture with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that is what I take most pride in. Importantly, build a strong women leadership pipeline. So to share with you some stats, at PepsiCo Greater China, we have 57% female executives and 56% female at managerial levels and above. We are very, very proud of that achievement. The particular vantage point allows me to observe and help support many female leaders who succeed by unleashing a variety of unique qualities. So to help the conference provide some food for thought, I thought it'd be interesting to share with you the theme I prepared for my remark today, which is unleashing unique advantages of being female leader. Now, often when we talk about female leadership or advancing female careers, we focus on challenges such as dual career, family commitments, needing to be more confident in oneself and being more assertive, sometimes breaking that glass ceiling at the more male-dominated C-suite and boardrooms, and the list goes on. These are very important dialogues. However, what I also think we don't recognize enough is celebrating and amplifying the unique women qualities, and that is the awareness I love to bring. Let me start off by first defining leadership. In my view, it is not a role or a position per se. It is rather a set of mindset and behaviors that inspire people to propel growth personally and collectively. And therefore, leadership really applies to everyone who has the opportunity to grow individually and as part of any organization. And great leaders come in all forms. Now, one particular framework that I liked a lot is what we use at PepsiCo. We call it the Great Five, because it really puts an emphasis on distinct dimensions for the next generation leaders. Basically, it's 5 dimensions that make up the word great, with the first being growth. And that is around curiosity, learning agility through stepping outside one's comfort zone. Second is about relationship, cultivating the trusting relationships across organizational boundaries by modeling integrity, authenticity, empathy, and inclusiveness. Third, execution, with that energy and resilience that strive for accomplishments. And number 4, agility, adapting one's approach to embrace an ever-changing market environment. Finally, thinking, being insight-driven, think creatively, and with long-term and holistic perspectives. Now, you're hearing some of those very important words that resonate with women qualities. And that's what I like to talk about today. I think female leaders are uniquely positioned to excel with these qualities. I'll give you some examples how they're manifested by women leaders, which I'm sure you can relate to and expand with more. Now, starting with growth and curiosity. Statistically, female leaders do tend to be more inquisitive and self-aware. We're open to admitting what we don't know, and we're more willing to seek help. Just think between you and your partner, who is more likely to ask for direction in a foreign city? Hugely important quality for personal growth. Women are also more likely to think beyond numbers and combining them with intuitions. And this explains why innovation and creativity have found to be dominant traits in female leaders. And I certainly found that to be the case among my female associates. The second example is around relationship. Compassion is a notable characteristic among female leaders. Now, 2/3 of adults surveyed agree that being compassionate better describes women than men. So female leaders can be more effective in collaborating with others to achieve common goal, making emotional connections and building that trust. We're more team-oriented also and more inclined to attribute success to team efforts. Female leaders use the emotional sensitivities and communicative strengths to bring teams together and facilitate open exchanges of ideas. All these traits are important qualities in building coalitions and trusting team cultures. Final example on execution and resilience. Researchers also found a higher level of stamina among women, making us more likely to hunker down, systematically walk through the challenges, and leaving no stones unturned when necessary. I believe during COVID, someone noted a correlation between the gender of country presidents and how well COVID were contained or managed, attributing this to women leaders being more reflective when making trade-offs and less likely to have overconfidence as a hubris. I wanted to emphasize that these observations by no means attempt to stereotype gender differences. However, what is important is that they underscore opportunities to enhance leadership with nuanced strengths, and that is applicable to all genders. They also help build extra awareness beyond just addressing limitations and on to actually building confidence through amplifying these advantages. So, to summarize a little bit, great leadership applies to everyone, not just those with specific positions. Women are well placed to demonstrate some very important leadership qualities and to lead with strengths. So my call for action today is that we individually as female leaders and collectively as fabric of our organizations should celebrate and unleash these traits a little bit more deliberately. And as a final remark, men are very important allies too. So for the male colleagues, I don't know how many of you are here are joining today. Thank you for taking the time to join. And it's a very special shout out to your partnership and commitment. So I hope the simple remark above would help kick off with some food for thought over the next 2 days. And thank you very much again for the opportunity to allow me share my thoughts. Have a great event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne, for your thoughtful and inspiring sharing with the audience. I think you raised some really wonderful foundational points from which to continue to be energized and learn from one another. And in that spirit, we're now going to turn to our pre-recorded fireside chat with Chelsea Clinton, who really in some sense needs no introduction. She's had a very impressive career working in business, but also with her family's foundation, and has authored and co-authored best-selling children's and nonfiction books. So I'll let Stella to play the video now. I'm so delighted to be in conversation with Chelsea Clinton today. As vice chair of the Clinton Foundation, Chelsea works alongside the foundation's leadership and partners to improve global health and wellness, increase opportunity for girls and women, create economic opportunity and growth, and inspire emerging leaders across the United States and around the world. So much of what we're in conversation about today at the Women's Conference. A longtime public health advocate, Chelsea also serves as vice chair of the Clinton Health Access Initiative and uses her platform to increase awareness around issues such as vaccine hesitancy, childhood obesity, and health equity. In addition to her foundation work, Chelsea has done so many other things, including written several books. In some ways, she needs no introduction. I think for me, in addition to all of her many accolades, it's been a great privilege in my life to be able to call Chelsea also a friend. So great to see you, Chelsea.
Oh, Mattie, it's so wonderful to see you. I only wish selfishly that we were in person having this conversation, and yet so thankful that we are able to be together in, I know, kind of very sincere community, even if we are separated by many thousands of miles while doing that. And thank you for your time today.
Yes, well, speaking of time, I feel like I have become more conscious than ever about time, and especially making sure that I'm allocating my time in a manner aligned with my values. I think a lot of women are thinking about this at the moment. You are someone who has managed to do that better than perhaps anyone I know, and you've also been able to turn your passions into professional opportunities. Can you talk about how that came about, and any advice or insights for those of us still seeking a way to do the same, to make better use of our time?
Oh, goodness. Well, I think there are as many right answers to those questions as there are people joining us today. I would never say kind of what has worked for me kind of should be the heuristic for anyone else. I will say, though, something that I had to teach myself when I became a parent was that it was not only okay to not do kind of everything every day. It was unhealthy to expect myself to do everything every day. And kind of by that, I mean, before I became a parent, every day I aspired and believed more days than not, really was able to be, a good professional in whatever work I was doing at the time, a good partner to my husband, a good friend, to my closest friends, including Mattie, a good daughter, very close to my parents, a good granddaughter when my grandmother was alive. And then I became a parent, and all of a sudden I had a new organizing principle in life, which became unapologetically, so authentically, the most important part of my life, like being a parent. And I found that I couldn't all of a sudden be the parent I wanted to be and do everything else that I, wanted to do. And so I had to shift thinking about my life in terms of days to weeks. And that, since we're talking about time, was really transformative for me and enabled me to feel healthier and happier, because then I could set kind of weekly goals for myself. Here's what I want to get done this week in terms of now, the books I want to write, or programmatically what I hope happens at the Clinton Foundation, or kind of through the work of Metrodora, my venture fund. Here's, I'm going to try to call at least 3 friends this weekend and hopefully catch up with them. I really want to carve out time to, talk to my parents. I had to be more intentional about kind of being the person that I wanted to be, because it thankfully has felt so organic to be a present parent, to be fully engaged in my kids' lives. And yet, while being a mom is the most important part of my life, it's not the only part of my life that matters and has value to me. And also, I think part of being a good parent, at least for me, is trying to help build the world that I want my children or any of our kids to grow up in, to hopefully kind of thrive in. And so I just really had to think of time differently when I became a parent. I wasn't going to clean out my email inbox at the end of every night any longer. I was going to try to do it, though, by the end of the week. I wasn't going to be able to call everyone back like the day that they called me, but I hopefully would be able to call them back, no later than a week after they'd rung. And so, Mattie, just thinking about time, that to me was the most significant shift of how I thought about time in life. And it did have to be a conscientious shift, and one I had to sort of train and then habituate myself into, because otherwise I was just going to be so clogged with kind of guilt and feelings of failure all the time, because I no longer was able to do kind of all that I had done before I became a parent. And now, thankfully, I feel quite settled in that way of thinking about and organizing life.
Yeah, it is kind of a really illustrative example of how becoming a parent changes everything. And your comments made me think about a piece of advice that I got when we were in our early 20s. And there was a woman who I really looked up to and admired. She's still kind of a friend and a mentor. And I just sort of said, how did you achieve everything? Like, you have it all. And she said, it didn't happen all at once.
Yes.
That's a line that I like repeat to myself at any time when, I'm not doing any one of the things that, or it's not all happening at once, because it never does, right?
I agree with that so emphatically. I've had so many conversations with particularly younger women, and I say, at least for me, it has not been possible to have it all at the same time. And if I look at women I really admire, Mattie or other friends of ours from Stanford who are really excellent, extraordinary research scientists, who are doctors, if I think about friends in kind of advocacy, politics, the media, law, people who've started and grown, extraordinary companies. I just think about the women I admire as leaders in their fields and also as women and as parents. And it just is so clear to me, kind of the pattern is such that absolutely you can have it all. You cannot have it all at once. And that's okay. Hopefully that's liberating to think, okay, I can do all that I want to do, all that I feel called to do. But if I try to do it all at once, it will probably not be as successful or as personally or professionally, satisfying.
Yeah. Well, you also talked about trying to shape through your work and through the choices that you make, how you allocate your time, the type of world that you want for your children. And, I feel at the moment we seem to increasingly be living in a very polarized world that's dominated by destructive zero-sum thinking, seeing everything in black and white, no room for gray or nuance. And I find it almost baffling, but actually really distressing that coming out of the pandemic, we're, instead of having more empathy for one another globally, because no matter where you were in the world, the pandemic, at some point it was scary. At some point, your children's education was probably disrupted. Maybe you had stress around your career, etc. Instead of having more empathy for one another and our common humanity, we seem to be more divided than ever. And I feel like this logic threatens so many things at the moment. But kind of related to this destructive logic, in some sense, we recently chatted a bit about the facing kind of the sobering reality that progress can be undone, or at least that it's not linear, it doesn't, it's not inexorably bound to arc in a positive direction, and this is a women's conference. So I wanted to ask a bit about how you view the ways in which the pandemic and some of the recent current events or the turmoil of the last few years seem to have exposed stalled progress or even maybe eroded progress on women's rights globally.
Well, Mattie, I think there's such an important, set of recognitions and also questions, kind of in what you just said. The recognition of how polarized we are, and how so much of our debates at the moment seem to be binaries. And now I should be clear that I do think sometimes there are binaries, including whether or not women do have kind of full rights to fully participate in education, in kind of our economy, in kind of having the full expression of human rights to be able to fully participate kind of in kind of educational opportunities and kind of professional spheres. And so I in no way want to imply that I think there aren't moments where there are real binaries of, does a woman have full rights and agency or does she not? But I do think so much of our kind of conversations, our debates, our dialogues are kind of hewed in, kind of constructed around binaries that are not representative of the full spectrum of kind of choices or options for how we might kind of live together, work together, learn together, cooperate together, whether the we there are kind of two people in a romantic relationship or kids in a classroom or community members in a community or kind of countries kind of in our world. And so I couldn't kind of agree more with what you said, and yet also do, in this context of talking about women, recognize that there are binaries, like does a woman have full rights or not? And certainly here in the United States, we've seen a real erosion of women's rights in some areas, and also a real kind of stalled dynamic in the progression of kind of other rights. And so just two kind of data points to what I mean there. So of course, probably as everyone here painfully knows, with the Supreme Court kind of effectively gutting the right to privacy last year in the Dobbs decision, we've seen growing restrictions on a woman's right to make the reproductive choices that are right for herself and for her family. A significant proportion of women who decide to terminate early pregnancy, to have an abortion, actually are already themselves mothers, are already working, and are making a choice that they believe is right and best for themselves as a woman, and also for themselves as a mother and parent to the children that they're already parenting and nurturing kind of in this world. And so I find that deeply distressing. We're recording this conversation. I don't know kind of what will happen in the days between now and when it airs, but recently we just saw Florida kind of have a very restrictive 6-week ban on abortion, which we know will affect a number of women in a myriad of ways, including compromising the health and safety of women who actually do want to kind of carry a pregnancy to term and have children, and those who very much understandably, in my view, want to be able to have a fundamental human right to make the reproductive health choices, again, that are right and best for them. So that's one area. An area where we have seen real progress, but are now seeing in some states here a plateau, is the effort to ban child marriage. So a decade ago, it was legal in every state and territory for girls and boys to be married under 18. Overwhelmingly, though, it was girls being married to adult men. In many places, parental consent and a court were required to kind of sanctify this, but effectively, it was largely kind of parental sanctioning with kind of court rubber stamping of trafficking children into marriage. Child marriage is now banned in 7 states, thankfully, and we were making real progress. And now, kind of to your point, Mattie, about this climate we're in so many states where we had thought we might be close to having, a ban to really protect kids, so kind of girls could be girls, not brides. Now, many, largely men, are saying, well, if someone gets pregnant, it's still probably the right answer for them, even if they're just 14, or kind of cultural traditions or religious traditions, think it's okay for children to be married. And that's very much when I think, the important kind of principle, the separation of church and state, should prevail, and we should have universal rights here that apply to all children, to all women in all circumstances. So we are seeing a regression in some areas and a stall in other areas. And yet, to me, I don't think that we can be depressed by this. We can't kind of fall into the kind of seduction of inertia. We have to continue to kind of press forward to regain rights, or to keep achieving rights, so that every girl, every woman here in the United States is able to live up to their fullest and highest and best potential for themselves and for their communities. And ultimately, that's good for all of us.
Yeah, you're saying that brings me to the final kind of question I'd like to ask you, because it is so disheartening, right? And it's easy in the face of things that feel disheartening or overwhelming to sometimes just, not want to rise and kind of keep keep engaging or keep fighting to shape the world that we want for ourselves and for our children. And, I do feel like you learn from your friends at all phases of life, but one lesson that I really took from our early friendship was a motto of your families that you shared with me, the idea to get caught trying, which I think echoes what you were saying this now. You get caught trying because you only have this one glorious life that, to live. And so why not try? And so I'm curious if you would still describe this as a guiding principle for you, and maybe does it mean anything to you now that it perhaps didn't when we were younger?
What a good question. Yes, get caught trying. Very much one of kind of our family's kind of credos, mottos. Another for my grandmother was that, life's not about what happens to you, it's about what you do with what happens to you. Something else
that's a really good one.
That's a good one too. And something else that I've thought a lot about recently that it's sort of what I've observed of my parents, which is that kind of every success and setback is a challenge to do more. That just because it didn't work the first time doesn't mean you still can't kind of think how to do it differently and do it better. But also every time you achieve something doesn't mean you should kind of rest on your laurels. It just means you've learned something that hopefully kind of better equips and purposes you to do more in the future. And yet I do think all of that still circles back to kind of get caught trying, and whether that's get caught trying, to be a better friend or a better partner, or in this context, get caught trying to help make the world a better, more equitable, more sustainable place. I think about this a lot in the context of something that you mentioned earlier in your way too generous introduction of me, which was about our work around kind of vaccine hesitancy and acceptance, where we were very proud to work with partners from across the political landscape, the cultural, the religious landscape, working with partners with whom we may have fundamental disagreements in areas like, reproductive choice as a human right, in kind of the political arena and areas kind of, probably in every area, but kind of vaccine acceptance, just because we knew how important it was that we help educate and kind of through education empower people to make the kind of choices, hopefully to vaccinate themselves and the children, because we knew that was the only way kind of through and out of the depths of the pandemic, and to try to help protect lives and livelihoods here in the United States and also in our global community. And so, it was not always easy work, and yet it is also work that isn't finished. And so while I know so many of my friends in the public health arena are so understandably battered by kind of the questioning of their expertise and their ethics, thankfully they haven't been dissuaded. So while they may be tired, they aren't stopping. And so I feel like if my friends who are, frontline healthcare workers, who are epidemiologists and virologists, are still pushing forward to help not only advance the science, but advance the acceptance of the science, I just want to do whatever I can to help in those conversations, because I don't want to live in a world where measles makes a roaring comeback. I don't want to live in a world where polio is endemic, across the globe again. And I also don't want to live in a world where we're not doing everything we can to ensure everyone is protected against, COVID-19 or whatever kind of its next variants may be. So I'm going to hopefully continue to get caught trying with any and all partners that I can find to work with, because at least in this issue, we have found an enormous amount of common ground. And I do believe we have to build on that ground where we find it, even if it may not always be apparent or obvious elsewhere. If we find it, we have to build what progress we can and then work to protect that progress every day.
Yeah, no, that's really kind of beautiful note to end on. And, we're going to move on to continue to talk about US, China, and a whole bunch of complicated issues. But I remember when my family and I were thinking about moving back to China this time, I thought about get caught trying in terms of, it feels complicated and I care deeply about this relationship. You might get caught trying. And, I think one of my, poetic mottos from the Ulysses poem, you may be weary, you may be tired. I don't remember the exact quote anymore, but to seek, to serve, to find, and not to yield. And so you certainly haven't yielded in your own advocacy and the wonderful work you do. And we're all grateful for it. And we're grateful for your time today.
Well, Mattie, thank you so much. And I'm very grateful that you also certainly have not yielded. And while I miss you very much and wish you were closer, deeply selfishly, I'm so proud of all you're doing and so grateful that you are in China and trying to help us always better understand each other and to better understand the world that I do believe most of us want to live in, want to thrive in, and very much want our children to inherit. So thank you, and thank you to everyone for joining us today.
Great. Well, that was fun to rewatch that conversation. So many thanks to Chelsea for joining us. And there were a couple, I think, notes that she struck or that we struck in the conversation that tee up the rest of our program nicely. Contrary to what Chelsea and I said, today we will have it all, actually, because the series of panel speakers we have and the content that they will cover, we're going to have it all. Starting with one that we kind of concluded the fireside chat focusing on healthcare. So I'm really pleased to now introduce the healthcare panel, especially coming out of the global COVID pandemic outbreak. We've learned countless lessons on the importance of identifying pathogens and building up an efficient global healthcare system to handle what will probably be the next pandemic, and also to just improve public health outcomes globally. So let's look to the healthcare panel. Great, thanks for that video. I'm going to introduce our panel moderator, Jennifer McCall, who will introduce the panelists. Jennifer McCall is a partner at Pillsbury. She co-leads both the private wealth and the litigation trusts, estates, and high net worth teams, and is a leading authority on U.S. and international gift and estate planning. Over to you, Jennifer.
Hi, thank you so much, Mattie. I just wanted to introduce our wonderful speakers. We're very lucky today because we have quite a few very prominent speakers in the area of women's healthcare in China. Dr. Sujuan Ba is president and CEO of the National Foundation for Cancer Research. Dr. Ba has more than 25 years of experience organizing global cancer research, collaborative programs, and deploying adventure funding to support innovations. Besides her role as president and CEO at the National Foundation for Cancer Research, Dr. Ba co-founded AIMHI Accelerator Fund in 2019, a nonprofit organization focused on advancing oncology startups through venture and impact investments. Under her leadership, AIMHI has seed invested in 18 early stage oncology companies. Thank you, Dr. Ba, for being with us. Our next panelist is Lu Zhang, founder and managing partner of Fusion Fund. Lu Zhang is the founder and managing partner of Fusion Fund, a renowned Silicon Valley-based investor, a serial entrepreneur, and a Stanford engineering alum. Lu is a World Economic Forum Davos Young Global Leader, class of 2018, and was recently selected as a Best 25 Female Investor by Business Leader. She has also garnered other accolades, including the featured honoree in VC of Forbes 30 Under 30, Silicon Valley Women of Influence, and Town & Country 50 Modern Swans, Entrepreneurship Influencer. Thank you so much, Lu, for being with us. And finally, our third panelist is Dr. Hsing, Professor of Medicine at Stanford University. A senior fellow for the Center for Innovation in Global Health at Stanford University, Dr. Hsing has conducted population-based epidemiological studies on 4 continents, including North and South America, Asia, Africa, and Europe. She is a leading expert in the epidemiology and etiology of prostate, hepatobiliary, and thyroid cancers, as well as in hormonal carcinogenesis and circadian rhythm. Thank you so much for Dr. Hsing for joining us with your valuable time. So I thought we would just maybe start with a couple of questions for our panelists. Starting first with Sujuan Ba. Maybe would you like to start with the idea of how has the outcome of breast cancer changed over the past several decades?
So the past several decades, a lot have happened. We have seen tremendous amount of progress in terms of treatment diagnosis. And also we are really advancing the treatments through the genomic medicine. And so the survival rate now for breast cancer, if you think about breast cancer, is made of more than 10 subtypes, and major types are 4. And now the survival rate, we are reaching 5 years, 90%. So it's quite a bit improvement, significant improvement in terms of mortality, the death rates, survival rate.
Oh, that is great. Thank you so much. And could you let us know, is breast cancer a uniform disease?
No, breast cancer is a heterogeneous disease. So just like a cancer in general is considered now as heterogeneous. In the past, everybody treats cancer, talk about cancer based on where the cancer is seen, based on the organ. That's the old thinking. And now, especially during the past 15 years, we have seen that cancer now is really a genetic mutation. The treatments should be based on the mutation pathways. And we are starting to see the comprehensive genomic profiling and tumor signature and molecular profiling and gene sequencing are being utilized to really diagnose the cancer nature and then guide the treatment. And everybody heard we have the HER2 positive, we have hormone receptive positive, and then other types are triple negative. Those are all very heterogeneous and different types of cancer. So it's not a uniform disease. And we need to study more and more so that we can have the personalized approach and target every person's genetic mutation to improve the survival rate.
That's so fascinating. Thank you so much, Dr. Ba. And a final question for you. Would you mind saying, is the prognosis of Asian American women with breast cancer different from Caucasian women?
So fortunately, based on all the research showing, we have seen the Asian Americans have the lowest incidence and death rate in breast cancer compared to Caucasians and Black women. And that is really based on the environmental, genetic, and also different factors like lifestyles. All of those factors are contributing to different types of cancer and also survival rate.
That's so interesting. Thank you so much for giving us some insight. Maybe we'll talk now with Dr. Zhang. Lu, can you please give us some thoughts about recent developments that you've seen in your world in this area?
Yes, thank you very much. I think it's really good synergy with what Dr. Sujuan just mentioned about healthcare and also the future for breast cancer, because that's a perfect example of the future of the other healthcare innovation we're looking for, because we're looking for a better solution to provide a personalized diagnostic services, digital approach into healthcare industry. So I run a Fusion Fund, which I started in 2015. And before that, I was a healthcare entrepreneur. So I personally went through the journey as an entrepreneur, also be able to see the value of bringing new technology to healthcare industry, which is 20% of US GDP, with huge amount of high quality data, could create a dramatic innovation opportunity. So in the past couple of years, the good thing is lots of fundamental innovation happened. And now with the discussion of generative AI, the largest industry application opportunity is within healthcare and life science. So as I mentioned early on, the trend we're looking at range from digital diagnostic, it's not only just one-time diagnostic, digital therapeutics, digital biology, digital life science. Essentially, different people got same cancer or same disease for different reasons. And the treatment plan should be personalized as well, and we're capable of doing so with AI. Another thing I'm super passionate about within healthcare is really mental disease. With the aging population, lots of discussion about dementia, Alzheimer, Parkinson. Meanwhile, if you look at the younger generation, the teenagers, they're actually suffering, huge percentage of them are suffering from mood disorder. And now with AI and also other digital platform, we're able to do better correlation to find out what actually trigger different mental disease for each individual and be able to build up personalized solution for that. Of course, besides healthcare, we're also investing in the enterprise AI, network security, and the last one is industrial automation. We're in a very exciting moment right now that just technology integration happening across all different industries. But of course, I'm actually in Washington, D.C. right now. I was in this lunch event with First Lady, and we also have other discussion really about before we integrate AI, we need to make sure we understand the scope of the technology. And essentially, data is a key. Who owns the data, who could access the data is ultra important. So how we understand the ownership, how we handle and protect the data, then we use the super effective tool like AI to get the result we want.
Oh, that's so interesting. I loved hearing all of that. Would you say that it's been, are there areas of challenge that you see in your entrepreneurial efforts? Like you mentioned security and ownership, other problems, or maybe a way to blend different approaches?
Yeah, I think now if you ask me, we've been investing early stage companies since 2015. So we really see the entrepreneur went through a different market situation. They're facing different type of challenges. Startup is hard. I think now probably a broader topic, our general challenge for smaller startup is how to access to the valuable data. They want to build a solution for insurance industry, for pharmaceutical industry, for financial industry, but they didn't own the data. Large corporate has the data. How to find a balanced way for them to build up partnership to access to data is important. Not to mention all these large corporates like Microsoft, Google, Facebook, they're essentially monopoly of the data. And another important thing is now we have so much discussion about the data regulation. We need to make sure the regulator put in regulation to limit the behavior of large corporate, not the smaller startup. We couldn't make it even harder for startup to pursue opportunity in that domain. Another challenge is really just everyone knows this macro capital market situation, this cycle we're going through. Definitely in average, it's much harder for founder to raise money. But on the other side, what we saw is the total number of the deals got funded decreased. The total amount of capital investing to early stage company increased, which means the top performing company got concentrated capital and concentrated resources. That's also the reason why we always say in the history, even till now, the great company always start during the economic downturn. There's a reason for that. Another thing is that the adoption of technology will be much faster. You asked me challenge, but maybe another big silver lining is we have this CXO network I launched in 2018. Now we have 44 CTO from Global 1000 company work with us. And one of my partner I recruited was the former CTO of HP. Now all the CTO, CIO of large corporate, they're in panic mode because it's not a question of whether we should build in-house or buy, they have to buy. Their employees are throwing all the sensitive data into ChatGPT, including some politicians' assistant team, they're throwing data into the ChatGPT. and they didn't tell their supervisor. And this is all sensitive data with huge liability. And I was always joke about why we need human in the loop, because you couldn't put AI into prison. But if anything happened, human are the one take responsibility, go to jail. So all these CI are so scared and also so panic mode right now, and also give them huge motivation to work with startup founder more engaging and also more aggressively.
It's so interesting. And would you say, Lou, that there is a advantage for women, a disadvantage, or is it neutral in this area?
I think, yes, I was a female entrepreneur. I also, Fusion is one of the very few female-led VC firm, not to mention focus on healthcare deep tech. I always heard this term like one of the field. It been 8 years, still one of the field. So if you ask me whether women have challenges in the industry, yes, they are. Like female founders still have harder time to get funding and also harder time to get top talent. Not to mention, be able to quickly establish a strong partnership with large corporate. It's just a lack of the support, lack of funding, and lack of existing community. But on the other side, fundamentally, we're not really minority in terms of number. We're got minoritized because lack of opportunity. And if you look at the intelligent level, knowledge base of the female founder, it's amazing. Another thing I really want to champion for female founder is female founders are so good at cost control. With this environment, it's essential. Whoever could survive gonna be the winner. And the female founder always have a tendency to be more cautious on where to spend money, better on risk management, and also resilient. Women are so resilient. I always joke about, especially female founder who already have kids. Not only they become a mastermind of efficiency, time management, also the level of the resilience you saw on the mother mindset is like amazing. So I think this is a great opportunity. I always talk about technology innovation, free human capacity. More importantly, technology innovation, free woman capacity. I think we're gonna be able to adopt technology to minimize the difference of physical strengths, but be able to really shine with our mental and also our intelligent level, be able to push further innovation. And one last thing, sorry, a little bit long. I just really want to champion for this. We recently did a report on female healthcare sector. It's a huge underserved market, which means big opportunity just to serve the whole, not only just for women healthcare, and also in most of the family, women, it's always most likely are the caregiver to the aging group. So technology could enable them to be more efficient, effective, have a huge, huge market opportunity.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Lou. That's so interesting. I love I love thinking positive things. I feel when people have had difficulties, and a lot of women, frankly, have had to overcome a presumption that we aren't as smart or whatever. We may be higher educated, we may be more resilient, we may be more determined, and maybe more good at finding solutions sometimes.
Yeah, I want to quickly add in that, lots of the things I've been trying to support it. I think it's already not the time we have to be a rule breaker. We need to make more women become rule maker in the boardroom, become the CEO of the company, number one person in the large corporate. Once we become the rule maker, the culture will be different.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Absolutely. Well, I appreciate that. And I really impressed by all your accomplishments. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now I would like to ask Dr. Hsing to comment. So one of the questions that came up, Dr. Hsing, was for lack of research funding for Asian Americans, what can we all do to help? Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you so much. I just noticed that. So in the United States, based on the 2020 census data, Asian Americans constitute 7% of the population. But if you look at the funding from National Institutes of Health over the last 30 years, the funding for Asian American health and prevention research is only 0.17%, less than 0.2%. So it really is very low. And it does take a village to change that. And I think from all of us, what we can do is, in addition to doing more research, we do need more support and funding for research. I think for everybody in the community, what we can do is lobby for funding for research, and together we will be able to make a change and to change the policy. the other thing is for all of the audience here, I think you are all very powerful leaders in your field, so you can leverage your influence and your authority and your power to push this forward. And also as a community member, Asian Americans, most of us, or many of us, we can actually take an action to actively participate in research, because Asians usually, they shy away from being a participant in research study. And therefore we do not have data from Asian American to make the appropriate decision and clinical treatment. So in addition to push for more funding to help change the policy, we can also be part of the research program, become a study participant. I actually recently joined a study. In addition to being principal investigator, I'm also a study participant in other studies, and it's a very gratifying experience for me.
Oh, that's great. So Dr. Hsing, another question is for cancer. You mentioned that early detection of cancer is important. What is the trending and important research in early detection of cancer that you and others are doing now?
So there are many exciting things going on. And one of the very promising and very exciting project to me is to use multiple biomarkers to detect multiple cancers using blood, using our blood. And because this is minimal invasive, this also can be expanded to low resource countries and systems. But this is not quite ready for prime time yet. So currently we're conducting a study in 5 countries to include 5,000 participants, cancer patients and non-cancer patients, and to collect blood, and then to test a whole array of biomarker in the panel. Probably in 2 years that we will have very good results. So hopefully you will invite me back to share the results with you in 2 years. And once that is validated, I think we will be able to actually detect cancer at a much earlier stage, and that would give us better survival, better prognosis, and also easier for treatment. And so that would really benefit not just Asian American cancer patients, all of the cancer patients globally.
And Jennifer,
that's exciting. That's wonderful. Go ahead, Dr. Ba.
Jennifer, and continuing Dr. Cheng's points, I like to actually make some statements about the recommendations we can all take on from today. For example, we all know earlier we said cancer is a genetic mutation, and so all cancer patients should have germline and germline testing and pharmacogenetic testing, and eventually all of our children should have a whole genome sequencing at birth. And many of the European countries have already adopted this practice. And in the future, all of us, the healthy individuals, should have germline and pharmacogenomics testing. And some of the data has shown 1 in 6 healthy adults at increased risks for a series of health conditions due to their genetics, right? And many may not even know it. So regular cancer screening can help detect the cancer early. When it's detected early, it's most treatable. And at this time, well, there have been more than 120 genomically targeted therapies approved for cancer. Like I said, cancer drugs now are approved based on the genetic mutation, not based on what type of cancer it is. So in the future, many of those therapies could be used for prevention. And the public communities should manage the chronic conditions better. And we all know chronic conditions such as diabetes and obesity, high blood pressure can increase the risk of cancer. Those are all important steps that we can take to improve the public health. And we also needed to tell the public that stay up to date on the vaccinations. And some of the vaccines can help reduce the risk of cancer, such as HPV vaccine, and that can prevent cervical cancer. So early diagnosis and effective treatments of all type of cancer are critical, for positive prognosis. And we've seen many novel technologies are being developed for early detection of primary tumors, like Dr. Hsing mentioned. We also see some of the technologies that are being developed to test the metastasis and control metastasis and control the recurrent diseases. And those are all the effective ways of managing breast cancer. So for people who are diagnosed with cancer, when we hear somebody, your friends and loved ones are diagnosed with cancer, and ask the doctors to do the genetic sequencing. It's very important to have the molecular profiling data, the baseline. And we have seen that targeted therapies can really improve some of the survivals. So, and treat cancer aggressively and early. And we have seen enough data that the chance of response decreases by about half with each subsequent treatment. And the researchers have seen this again and again for many types of drug treatments. So make sure we get the best treatment at the big onset of the cancer, and continuous monitoring. And right now, many technologies are emerging, and the CTC and others. And above all of that, if you have exhausted all the treatment options the doctors tell you, seek out the clinical trials that might help. And enrolling in clinical trials can save lives. Right now, the enrollment rate for clinical trials is still very low. And we need to encourage patients to enroll in clinical trials, and especially for underserved communities. And right now, the FDA has new guidelines and encouraging all the clinical trials to have enough populations from underserved minority communities, because currently many of the treatments are developed without having enough underserved populations. So in order to improve the survival rates and efficiencies of the treatments, get involved in the clinical trials. And most of all, I would say, is the best defense against cancer is to change the lifestyles. And that's what we can do now and today, right? So change the lifestyles, eat, have better diets, reduce alcohols, and don't drink moderately, and eat. For example, the diet, many people use, we Asian countries like to use a lot of stir fries and a lot of oil, spicy food. And try to use the Mediterranean diet, eat more fish, and those are known to improve the chances of being healthy and reduce the cancer incidence. And one more thing I like to say to Asian women, we all know Asian women tend to have very dense breasts, and dense breasts sometimes don't get tested well by mammogram. And so insist on utilizing different ways of testing breast cancer. And there are MRI ways, ultrasound, all of that. So make sure you keep that in mind, and then do when you see something not right, speak up, seek a second opinions. And those are very important recommend steps to take, recommendations to take to the communities.
Thank you so much. That's so helpful. And Dr. Ba, is genome sequencing very expensive? Is it covered by insurance?
And right now, the insurance, most of the insurance are covering, there are several providers And those can be done, especially at the major medical centers. Those are done routinely. But the problem is at the community clinics. So with all the technologies available and many of the insurance covers, and only 20% of people, 20% of patients are being sequenced when they are diagnosed. So we got to
Dr.
improve
Bart,
those
should somebody get sequenced before they're sick? Should they do it normally? Like you said, in European countries, they do it routinely.
So right now, actually, the European countries are doing it for their children. And so they keep the baseline, and doing it for all populations right now probably is not a reality, but it should be something that in the future, the public policy should be looking at it. But minimally, every cancer patient should do the genomic sequencing and improving the outcome.
Thank you so much. I want to go back to Dr. Hsing for a second. Dr. Hsing, did you want to talk about well-being and the 7 domains, or would you like to go through some slides?
Yeah, so maybe Stella can put the last slide, the flower here. I think we already talked about the cancer and the lack of funding, so we can go to this, the one before. Okay, the one before. Okay, so I was the one before this one. I was going to talk about the Stanford Welfare Life Study. This is actually to investigate determinants and patterns of well-being. This is also linked to cancer, because if you have better well-being, you will actually have better immune function, and that would actually minimize the risk of cancer down the line. And so we currently have a study. I was going to ask, do you want to live better? Do we want to live a satisfying life? And I'm assuming everybody does. And so this is the reason that we designed this study, is to accelerate the science of well-being, so we can use this information to share with everyone. So currently in the study, we are in 5 countries, and we have recruited over 32,000 individuals to the study over the last 7 years. And from the data of these 32,000 individuals, they are from China, Taiwan, Singapore, Thailand, and also US. We identify 7 domains, 7 components of well-being, and they are shown here: sense of self, positive emotions, social connectedness, resilience, negative emotions, purpose, and personal growth, and also physical health. And so meaning that if you cultivate these areas, you would have a better well-being. And next slide, Stella, please. And we also identify several factors associated with a better well-being. That is connect to nature. If you spend 10 minutes outside connecting to nature, and if you have good sleep, you exercise, have physical activity daily, also you are eating a healthy diet, and also every day you have self-care. You spend several minutes, 10 to 15 minutes to meditate, to engage in mindfulness activities, to do yoga and Tai Chi, because this really calms down your nerve systems, and you will be able to have better immune function. We also have several factors that are associated with lower well-being, and that is stress, anxiety, and depression. And this very much speaks to the mental health. That is a real problem right now. And so together, I'm hoping that we will learn more about this. We'll share this with the population, with everyone, and we can use this information to cultivate our well-being, to improve our well-being, and also to take care of each other. And hopefully then we will have a better society, a more productive, a kinder, and more passionate and compassionate society for all of us.
That's wonderful. That's so great. Did you want to comment on any some recent developments in that study? In other words, we talk about these opportunities, but it would be great to know how many people are following that good advice.
Yeah, so we are developing tips for improvement, and also we are curating the information into plain language for the general public to use, because a lot of the scientific language is difficult to digest for the general public. And we also have other molecular and omic studies to show that if you take care of your gut, if you eat healthy, and you take probiotic supplement, you have better gut, you actually will have better emotions and better system because your gut and brains are really connected. And so we now are organizing these materials to share with our population. Also, we have a community. I send out newsletters on well-being to the community, over 7,000 individuals. So we do have a lot of people paying attention to our research and data and trying to use that to integrate into their daily lives.
That's so
Jennifer,
great.
Jennifer, I
comment.
actually wanted to emphasize Dr. Hsing's point, the lifestyle factors. We all know three major factors that contribute to the to cause cancer, and random mutation errors in our body, environmental factors, and also family history, hereditary issues. But people will be surprised to hear cancer are caused by 66% by random mutations, right? 29% are lifestyle, and 5% by hereditary defects. And the people still need to know it takes 3 mutations to kick in cancer. So if we try everything like Dr. Hsing mentioned, we are reducing 29% of the chances of catching cancer, and that is important. So having a healthy lifestyle really reduce the chance of having more than 3 mutations kick in and cause cancer.
Thank you, Dr. Ba. And I want to give Lou a last chance to speak, since I want to hear more from her on these comments or others that she thinks are important.
Sorry, what is the question?
Would you like to add some thoughts in response to what has been discussed, or maybe you have some other comments you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting panel because we typically talk about the future of healthcare, but I found it's very informative that we also got lots of practical and real life suggestions and tips how we could better support ourselves, our personal health, and take care of the family. So for us as an investor, we always look at what's for us in the 3 years from now, 5 years from now, even longer. We talk a lot about the digital diagnostic, digital therapeutics, which two doctors mentioned about progress of different aspects contribute together to cancer, how we really find a correlation and deal with it. And also want to provide some good news related to that is probably before 2020, we only see FDA got accelerating in terms of approving all this digital solution in both diagnostic side and therapeutic side. But the one major player didn't engage at the time was insurance company. We need to get insurance coverage in order to encourage more people to use the digital solution. But since last year, I think all these insurance companies are become more open-minded and also start to cover lots of the digital therapeutic solution. I still remember January this year, I was in the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference in San Francisco, and we were kind of accusing insurance company on the panel saying that, okay, you guys are now engaging or now are evolving, but now it's different. So I think very soon we're going to see lots of a new digital therapeutic solution into practice. We also have a new term called digital medicine. Digital medicine from the diagnostic to therapeutics essentially make it a platform play. And it's not like you do diagnostic here, do therapeutics there, but everything could be assembling together. Another interesting area I really wanted to highlight that's also the future innovation that would change our life dramatically is digital biology. Many people didn't pay attention here. Some of you guys probably heard about AlphaFold by Google, by DeepMind. Now we have basically all the proteins folding structure exists on Earth, like a free database for everyone to use, which also really have a huge push for a subsector of digital biology, which is the synthetic bio. So for synthetic bio, sounds like very tacky term, but what does it for? Like it's gonna enable us to do much faster drug discovery, much faster manufacturing of the vaccine. If by any chance, and unfortunately we have another similar situation like a COVID, with AlphaFold, with AI, with Gen AI is effective to will be able to quickly identify the folding structure of the virus and have the vaccine and the medication ready much sooner. And moreover, pharma progress always take longer. Digital biology and synthetic bio could also change food industry. Imagine we grow a whole beef from one single meat cell and protein cell. This is doable now, and the cost is much cheaper. And last thing is really chemical industry. Chemical industry is huge, but also lots of issue for environmental damaging, pollution. Now with the synthetic bio, digital biology, there's a very good, cheaper and better ESG solution there. So there's so many things happening within digital biology, and not to mention digital life science. I don't think we have enough time to cover today, but I just want to throw out these terms for all the audience, potentially do some small homework and educate yourself. And then when the change actually happens in the next 2 or 3 years, you're going to be one of the first benefit from it.
That's so awesome. And this is such an amazing panel. I just wanted to thank everyone, Dr. Ba and Zhang and Dr. Hsing. Thank you so much, because I could hear from you for hours. It's just so interesting. And I think we're very lucky that you had the time to talk to us. I think we can answer some of the questions and answers by typing it in on the chat. We don't have time to do live questions and answers. And I'm not sure whether our host will be telling us that I think we may have run out of time. Is that right?
Yes, that was an incredibly inspiring and insightful conversation, but we are at time. So thank you to Jennifer and all of the panelists. I feel like we covered a very foundational topic to get started. So thank you to the healthcare panel. We're now going to move into the business and tech panel, another kind of area that's really exciting and garnering a lot of headlines and attention at the moment. So we're going to hear from some amazing female leaders at the forefront of business and technology. With so many businesses focusing on digitalization and innovation, also some of the ways in which kind of tech rivalry or the collapse of FTX or the Silicon Valley Bank in the past year, we've seen sort of the precarious nature of our financial systems, the scrutinization of TikTok, innovative products, and even kind of the race in EV and other kind of critical technologies, which play a role in so many aspects of our life, not just healthcare, as Zhang just alluded to, but also in almost everything. We're privileged today to kind of get a better understanding of what are the latest trends in tech, also the issue and the ways in which, tech around US companies de-risking in China plays a role. So let's turn to the tech panel intro video, please. Great. So we're honored to have Lili Zheng here today to be our moderator for the Women in Business and Tech panel. Lili is a senior U.S. international tax partner at Deloitte with substantial experience in cross-border tax planning. As the Asia-Pacific cross-border services leader, she's responsible for coordinating Deloitte services to clients from Asia-Pacific investing in the U.S. and U.S. MNCs investing in Asia-Pacific. Lili is the first woman from mainland China to become a partner in the Deloitte U.S. firm. With over $59.3 billion in revenue in 2022, Deloitte is the largest professional services firm in the world and the largest of the big four. So please welcome Lili Zheng. Over to you, Lili, to introduce the panelists and lead the panel. Can't wait.
Thank you, Mattie, for that very kind introduction. Today, we're very excited to have this panel because I call this the double D panel, the diversity background. So we have people representing Catherine Pond, who is a partner from Dorsey Whitney. And we have Serra Wei, who is a CEO and founder of Aegis. And we have Tina Wu representing DuPont. So with that diverse background and from a diverse location. So Tina, looks like you're in the evening, you're in Shanghai. and we have the East Coast and the West Coast of the United States covered. So welcome this double D panel. Quickly, I want to just make a quick introduction of our panelists. Catherine Pine is a partner and corporate group head in Dorsey's New York office and the chair of Dorsey's global recognized US-China practice. And she is one of the most preeminent Chinese-speaking business lawyers in New York. And with the strategic transactions she does, that includes M&A, joint ventures, equity, and debt financing, and other cross-border corporate transactions. And she also represents a series of Chinese companies in acquiring cutting-edge technologies and brand names in the US through M&A and investment. And she is awarded the top woman in deal making in 2023 by The Deal, and has been consecutively ranked the most prestigious legal ranking publication, Chambers Global, from 2019 to 2023. Outside of her legal work, though, Catherine is a supporter of arts and education. She is a trustee of China Institute and a member of the Board of Governors of University of St. Thomas School of Law. And then next we have Serra Wei, CEO and founder of Aegis Custody and Aegis Trust. And she is a cryptocurrency finance executive, investor, and entrepreneur with a blend of experience in both legacy and blockchain-based finance and cryptocurrency. Serra has worked with Goldman Sachs, Passport Capital on building investment strategies and structuring M&A deals, cryptocurrency trading and custody solution. And I just learned that one of the things that she has in common with Chelsea Clinton and our prior speaker is that they all went to Stanford. That's really awesome. And next we have Tina Wu. Tina is a global vice president and general manager of DuPont Mobility and Materials. And in her current role, she has a full P&L responsibility for more than $1 billion business portfolio. And she brings deep experience and track records for driving growth across a variety of markets, including electronics, packaging, renewable energy, automotive, and other industries. She has deep insights from multiple leadership roles in Asia Pacific region, and she's a part of the several Asia CEO organizations where she builds a broad network with the leaders across industries. With her global and diverse background, she has always been passionate in developing high potential talents across the region and has been a dedicated sponsor of DuPont Women's Network. So Tina joined DuPont in the US and then went to Shanghai, China in 2023. So with that cross-border experience, we're really looking forward to hearing her on what's happening. So with that quick introduction, I would like to turn to the panel and start us with the first question. That is to ask you to talk a little bit about your professional development. How did you get there? You know, these are tough positions to be, and you are at the height of your career. And in the case of Serra, founder and CEO of a company that is in an industry that is very new and trending. And then talk a little bit about your trajectory. So could we start with Catherine, please?
Thank you, Lili, for such a generous introduction. I also want to thank the China Project, SupChina, and my friend Anla Cheng for inviting me to this panel. It's a pleasure to work with you. My personal motto has been, never let a good crisis go to waste. I think Winston Churchill said this in the context of putting together the United Nations after the end of the Second World War. So my career story has been turning crises into opportunities and into new growth areas. I started my career as a transactional lawyer. I've been working on cross-border corporate transactions in the last 22 years. But the first 10 years of my professional life focused almost exclusively on corporate transactions. then things went terribly bad, right? So we started by having a lot of national security issues in corporate transactions, CFIUS reviews of the transactions. Some transactions got rejected by US authorities. And then we have export control issues, sanctions. And then as the US-China geopolitical tension continued to escalate in the last few years, it became harder and harder to do deals. But I felt it was an incredible learning opportunity, and it allowed me to be at the front of learning about the latest regulations, the latest techniques of getting things done, solving problems. So, and I feel very privileged that I was able to work alongside some of the world's best companies and entrepreneurs in solving the most cutting edge business problems. So the summary is never let a good crisis go into waste.
Amazing, Catherine, thanks. Hey, Serra, what about you? How did you get where you are? And with your background coming from Taiwan and to the US and starting a new business, tell us more about that.
Yeah, first, thank you so much for Lili as well as the China Project. Really honored to be on this panel. So I started my career in traditional finance, working as a technology stock analyst at Goldman Sachs. A pivotal moment for my career was really when I went to Stanford for my MBA degree. So Stanford Business School's motto is change lives, change organization, and change the world. And I think that has become a really big driver for me and many of my classmates that has been focusing on value creation, building, and entrepreneurship. I also was really fortunate when I was at Stanford to have a mentor, Professor Marion Schultz, who was a Nobel Prize winner and an originator for the Black-Scholes option model. I once had the conversation, remember, like Professor was really encouraging for me to kind of start an entrepreneur path. And I was asking him, there's so many large incumbents in the financial sector, like how would one be able to compete? And what I heard was that he was saying is so long as you can create value, you can compete with anyone in the world. So I think, well, if I don't take risk now, when should I take risk? And that's really kind of like how things get started. So I started my current company, Aegis Trust, Aegis Custody. Well, one of the very few qualified custodians for digital assets in the United States, and also the only one that also has a regulated digital asset custodian company in Hong Kong, where the market has become very exciting recently for the past couple of months, with Hong Kong regulators putting more regulation in the digital asset space. So while I am not an engineer, unfortunately, to be surrounded by many top-tier tech talents in the Bay Area, so that I have the confidence to start a tech company. And as Lili has mentioned, I grew up in Taiwan, so also kind of leverage this cost benefit for building and seeding all the tech team in Taiwan. I think the other panelist earlier was saying that women entrepreneurs are very good at cost control, optimizing every dollar we have and split that $1 to like 2, 3 or more. So that's exactly, I think, what I did to kind of leverage the small seed capital we raised, but essentially build a competitive and world-class tech team and also tech company with the custody platform. So it's been 5 years, amazing trajectory. I also built not only tech team in Taiwan, but the team in Asia, Hong Kong, and Singapore, as well as in the US. There's multiple offices in South Dakota, where we have our digital asset trust companies charter, as well as offices in New York. So really kind of like grateful for a learning journey with many people that I work with, as well as many support that I get from this community, as well as from the network.
That's great. Thanks, Sarah. You're definitely trying to get caught by trying. So taking some risks is awesome. So Tina, you are very experienced, and you have experience in both US and China, and you've seen a lot. So tell us a little bit more about how you got where you are and your trajectory, please.
Thank you. And also I want to thank my friend Mattie, who invited me to the event today. Really great opportunity to share some thinking among with all the talented, wonderful women. So for my story, and I've been thinking and reflecting while I'm listening to Catherine and Sarah. If I want to summarize and the couple of things that might be helpful, I think the first thing would be curiosity. And the second thing, maybe just a little bit of a courage at every turn. So the curiosity part is, I've been working with DuPont for the past 16 years. DuPont is a very diverse company, and we're in multi-industry. And every step since I joined DuPont back in 2005, when I think back, is really that curiosity of, I want to learn something about a different industry, a technology in a different product, a different function. So that took me going through different functions, starting from marketing to sales to product management, managing assets and R&D, et cetera, and taking me from maybe some industrial sectors to packaging industry, electronics industry, automotive industry. Every industry is different, value chain is different, customer base is different, how we design a product, how we put applications are different. So that intrigued me, that learning experience. And at the end of the day, the accumulated learning actually turned to something else. And you're able to connect all the dots, and all of a sudden there's, you're able to, you feel the confidence of leading a global team. And that's the second piece of, there, of course, like Catherine mentioned, we're not lack of crisis in this world. And there has been so many opportunities. You can call that disasters, you can call that transformation, but every turn, there are usually opportunities hidden, right? When we were, restructuring our company several times during my 16 years in DuPont, when we were having a huge merge with Dow and split into 3 companies, there are plenty of opportunities and chaos, you can say at the time, but there are always a strong need for something else, something different from, when you run a normal business, a routine daily business. I think just the little bit courage to seize that opportunity and raise hand to do something you have never done, and to believe you can do it well, that helps as well.
That's great.
Back to you.
No, that's great. That's awesome. Now, given that we have all of you with very diverse background, I would like to ask you all to share with us the trends that you see in your business sectors, especially given the ever-changing landscape in the US-China relations and the regulatory environment on tech and crypto. So maybe we'll start with Catherine again. Sitting where you are as a lawyer, and you have the opportunity to see so many deals from different industries, inbound and outbound, and how they're impacted. Would you start with sharing some of the trends that you see?
Sure. I will briefly talk about AI first, and then I'll get into a few other sectors, including EV batteries, renewable energy, and biotech. Since ChatGPT was released, we've been handling so many accelerated artificial intelligence, especially the generative, the GPT type of development. And I'm witnessing a lot of the big power competition, both among different corporations and also between the two big powers in AI, US and China. I think that the three most critical resources in artificial intelligence development are: number one, computing power; two, data; and three, technical expertise. So every day I've seen kind of wars competing for these three resources: computing power, data, and technical expertise. And then this is at the forefront of the US-China big power competition and the regulation as well. Last year, on October 27th of 2022, United States released a lot of new export control rules and regulations, including banning the exportation of leading edge computer chips, software such as EDA software that's used to design and write our computer chips, and also devices and tools to make supercomputers. Supercomputers are basically stacked computer chips. So NVIDIA A100 have been really hot commodity. I feel like every tech client in the world has been trying to get their hands on these chips. Then, of course, in March, NVIDIA promptly released a newer version, the H100, really the leading edge chips. And then because of these export control regulations, they're banned from being exported to China. So I know a lot of Chinese tech companies are trying to develop their AI kind of with handcuff, right? Trying to run with shackles. So it's very difficult. Then the data, right? So US certainly has the advantage in computing power, but China has a lot of data. Chinese economy is a lot more digitalized, given the mobile payment and the super apps. So Chinese government, of course, has put together a lot of restrictions against the exportation of data. And then the battle for technical expertise, the battle for talents has been going on forever, right? And then it's not just about money, it's also about resources, because the experts are attracted to not only compensation packages, but also who has the better data that would allow them to get ahead, right? But who also has the computing power that would allow them to get ahead. So really interesting development in this area. But I also want to talk about a few other industry. Something really big happened in 2022, not just the export control and the national security regulations, but United States also passed some really important new laws, including the Inflation Reduction Act, the Chips and Sciences Act, and also the Infrastructure and the Jobs Act. So these three new laws working together are like three engines of our economy, combined with all kinds of state level and local county level incentives, have really propelled a new trend, which is manufacturing onshoring. So we've been seeing and doing so many projects about solar panel manufacturing onshoring in the United States, EV batteries, but also don't forget about semiconductor, right, which has been getting a lot of support and subsidies under the new industrial policy of the United States, codified by the CHIPS Act. And then also biotech industry and climate tech have been really encouraged under the CHIPS and Science Act as well. So again, we're seeing a lot of onshoring of both the manufacturing activities and of course the accelerated R&D as well.
Thank you, Catherine. That was really good. And you and I were both at the Select USA Summit just a couple of weeks ago, right? Last week in DC. And we certainly, that was the largest event in attracting foreign direct investment into the US. And we certainly saw a lot of countries coming in, very interested onshoring or investing. So you have a large contingent, largest contingents actually from Taiwan, and you have China and you have Singapore and a number of other European countries as well. And I want to just mention that AI point that you talked about. I was here, I'm in San Francisco. I attended the commencement ceremony for a bunch of people graduating, and including my nephew at Berkeley, and then followed by a lunch with the professor that's in the AI area. And I was asking him about the issue of export control, and you're doing this AI, you're studying and R&D and all that. So are you getting caught in all this? He says, no, we're not. I said, well, how could that be? He said, well, because everything is open source. Everything we do is open source. And therefore, we're not exporting anything. Nobody. So it creates a platform rather for people to collaborate. So I thought that was fairly clever. So I just thought to share. Now, Serra, I do want to ask you, right, in the face of all the challenges and what's happening, the turbulence in the crypto world and blockchain, and you have FTX collapsing, you have Silicon Valley Bank, and then Silvergate, etc. And I know you recently spoke at the European Blockchain Week in Barcelona. So I'd like you to comment on the latest developments and what do you think about what's happening and how would that affect that industry?
Yeah, thank you, Lili. So actually, many exciting use cases in the blockchain space has come to realization in both public and private sectors. Like in the US, in California, the government is putting car title on blockchain. And in Hong Kong, the government just issued the world's first tokenized green bond. And yes, while in private, currently digital asset space, it seems to be clouded with some troubled companies, as you just mentioned. I really see that as an opportunity. Like the overall digital asset blockchain industry is weeding out the bad actors. But the whole industry is here to stay. And the trend is more regulations are coming. And so long as one can properly position itself, it can actually benefit from this movement of digital asset adoption as well as expansion. And I think moreover, there are more voices coming out and for asking for more safety, security, and protection all the way from the Congress and to, industry players as well as customers, so that we can build more sustainable as well as more scalable businesses. So actually today, there was an announcement of a $250 million acquisition of a Swiss digital asset custodian company. And it also projected that the digital asset custody industry will reach $10 trillion in 2030. This is just like a few years from today. So definitely we're seeing a huge amount of growth continue to happen in this industry. But the players are different. The players are the one that focusing on regulation, compliance, safety, security, and protection, so that the innovation go hand in hand with regulation in the financial sector space.
That's great. It sounds like you're riding the wave, my dear. So that is awesome. Well, glad that you're seizing the opportunity here. And now I want to turn to Tina. Given the US-China relationship challenges, right? Many MNCs are actually reducing their investment in China or pulling out. But I know DuPont is increasing its investment in China. Can you share some of the trends that you see? I know you're sitting on the different groups with the different CEOs, and what do you see? And then perhaps also comment on some updates on the development of innovative materials that you guys are doing in China to provide growth.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And yes, and this current situation of U.S.-China geopolitical tension is definitely impacting a lot of companies, including DuPont. But where we participate, actually, Catherine mentioned semiconductor and photovoltaic and electrical vehicle. Those are all focused industry for DuPont. So more or less, we're related not only by the tension, but also the growth opportunity behind it, because these are truly growing sectors. And what DuPont does are making a lot of hidden materials. I call that hidden materials, not consumer in the consumer brand, but behind it. For the 200 plus years, DuPont, since the start of the DuPont company, there has been, many transformations in what we do, what we innovate, from all the way from gunpowder to inventing nylon and Kevlar, bulletproof jacket and Nomex firefighter jacket and tons of material, aerospace and automotives. And why we're no longer doing some of that and we're moving to innovating new things. We still have our hero brands, but a lot of materials, since everybody can make it, then we move on. This is the active portfolio of our company that I'm sure Catherine has been helping. People like Catherine has been helping as we evolve over time. So today we're focusing on some of the emerging industry where things are changing. Let me use electrical vehicle as an example, right? The whole auto build in terms of how many cars are sold in the world are only going about 2 to 3% a year. That's mostly a population game. But electrical vehicle will grow about 27% in the next 5 years. And by 2030, 50%, more than 50% of the cars sold will be electrical vehicle. And guess what? China will account for 40% of that electrical vehicle sold by 2030. So just to give some numbers that you have the context, so you can see the traditional vehicles are fast declining. And you can imagine how many cars from a traditional engine jump into these battery box, the high voltage motor, a ton of camera chips and ADAS system. So all of these changes create huge opportunity, right? For material company like DuPont, we don't like the 2% growth. We like that 27% growth. And but only if you have the right material, because battery and high voltage motors, they evolve fast. They probably change every year at this early stage of this industry to get a longer driving range, safety, high speed charging, lower cost, lower density and lower weight, all of these good stuff. But all these change, every generation change requires a whole new set of design and material to enable the design. And that's what we're good at. So, imagine our engineers sitting with, Tesla, BMW, Mercedes, and when they open the batteries, like the kids opening, the Minecraft toy box, right? So that's the exciting piece, the time we're in. So we're inventing a ton of new materials every year now in industry like electrical vehicle or photovoltaic or others to enable. We're more of an enabler, the industry moving forward fast to get to, the next gen material. So this is a little bit of view from a traditional industry, very different from what Serra talked about, very exciting cutting edge industry. But I think, we're all living in the product world, and just want to give you a peek of what we're doing here.
That's amazing. Tina, I was just a couple of weeks ago, I was in Shanghai at the automotive show. Definitely China is playing a huge role there. And I saw BYD there and have their amazing cars displayed. And I was in Hangzhou and in Shenzhen. Certainly things are going back to normal a bit. So it sounds like DuPont is taking advantage and enhance its position and capture the growth in the local market. That is awesome. Now, I want to just switch gears a little bit since we're at the Women's Conference, and I wanted to just briefly talk about, and what do you see, right, as the advantage and disadvantage of being a woman in business or as an entrepreneur? So I think for Catherine as a professional, and for Serra as an entrepreneur, and then for Tina, you're a professional in a business in a multinational company, and you also worked in both US and China. So just if you could provide some contrast of the advantage and disadvantage of being a woman in business and entrepreneurship, that would be awesome. So Catherine, can I ask you to start again?
Sure. Although I'm so excited to hear the answers from Serra and Tina, I'll go very, very briefly. First of all, let me just say this. I love being a woman. I think our balance, right? So everybody has their challenges and advantages, but on balance, I just love being a woman. I didn't get a lot of sleep last night because of a client project, but no problem. This morning, I put on some makeup and I look like a new person. And I don't think my husband can do that. So we have some secret little weapons that are very handy in life. I also enjoy, the natural kind of instant sisterhood. A lot of women around me and in my life can form. I really want to thank SupChina for doing the Women's Conference every year, even during the pandemic. It really created a lot of the bond among women in the business and professional community in New York and around the world. I really enjoy, being able to form these relationships. And our previous panel, Dr. Ba and Dr. Hsing, they were on the professional panel, but they started to try to take care of us, right? Talking about lifestyle, diet, and how not to get cancer. I just love this. Our instinct of building relationships and taking care of each other, looking after each other. I just think this is great.
Thank you. Serra?
Yes. So so I think some of the when I look at being a woman and look at the disadvantages, I think for women entrepreneurs, there's the perception of we being taught to be humble. But I think in this world where the world is not created equal, humbleness sometimes in the Western, especially in the US culture, could be considered as a sign of weakness. And then also I think when I think about, having a voice, it's such a critical thing in the US. But I think culturally, we're being kind of taught that unless you're really successful, you don't really talk about your success, or you don't really kind of express your opinions. But that's also kind of different in terms of how men would normally do business. You see, they're very loud, regardless whether they have built things. They probably would say more or even own more compared to women, where I think almost compared to men, sometimes I see myself almost bootstrapping the business, even though we do get VC funding, but the level of the level of ownership, owning that confidence, I think it's very different. And I think that's something also I learned bridging from different cultures, bridging from different genders, and look at how the investors as well as the industry players as well as the cultural in the US is asking or wanting to see fund entrepreneurs. So something that I also come to adjust and learn and quickly kind of overcome with some of the biases. I do think as a woman and being a woman, I can express so much appreciation for many women that have supported me. I wouldn't really build this business without all the women that actually helped me and become the backers. I recently posted a LinkedIn message, a lot of times, even when I hire men in the business, they would take more than I can afford, or they were wanting to take all. And at those times, somehow they're just like amazing women show up and kind of help me and in this process, like across technology, operations, sales, licenses, legal. And I was also very fortunate to meet with Lili. Really grateful to work with such amazing.
Serra, I know you are paying it forward, right? You have a program to help paying it forward and help others.
Yes,
right?
yes. So actually, when I was thinking about how to actually, break through and break through this barrier and create more equality, we just initiated like a program where we offer like free custody for any company that is founded and led by women, which was widely received by this industry, because I think women like us, that we're all trying to like think about how do we actually do more for this industry and for this community, and to kind of eliminate these barriers. So not
That's
just
great.
like,
That's awesome. And our time is up, but I do want to give the last word to Tina, if you would, please.
Yes, when I think about some advantage of women in these fast changing world, and with a ton of uncertainty and volatility, I think, by nature, our ability to adapt, flexibility, resilience, as well as the amazing capability naturally for multitasking. And I can see that from all the women in, that I know, and in my team today, the women I developed in the past 10, 15 years. And it's just a natural, inherent, amazing characteristic sometimes we don't realize and use as advantage. Another thing very important is in this world is more and more collaboration versus me dominance, right? And so in any industry, that collaboration and natural collaborative nature also helps us. So I want to maybe say the last words. The thing that I always tell our DuPont Women Network is, you can do better, you can do more than you know. And so just to trust yourself and do more.
Great.
That is.
Well, thank you,
Yeah.
Tina, for those words of wisdoms. And thank you all for our panelists for sharing their insights and experiences and lessons learned. So let's all stay curious and have empathy and support each other. And thanks to the China Project for having this panel. Mattie, back to you.
Thank you so much, Lili. And my goodness, what a delightful and insightful panel. I feel as though there were some real pearls of wisdom in your personal journeys. So thank you for your generous sharing. And also, I think it really underscored the role that women in business have to play in shaping, a positive, or nudging the U.S.-China relationship in a more positive direction. So thank you to all of you for the work that you do every day in that regard, and for sharing so generously just now. And now we have the last panel of the day, an equally dynamic, important, and consequential topic, the climate tech panel. So climate tech investments have boomed in recent years. We're going to kind of get a picture of the latest trends in EV, solar, electrification industries, and also look which countries are leading. Has there been a move towards protectionism as a result of geopolitical tensions, or are we seeing kind of more hope in that area? Let's see the climate tech intro video to start. Now, I'm very pleased to introduce our moderator for this exciting panel, Virginia Tan. Virginia is the founding partner of Teja Ventures, an early-stage VC fund for emerging Asia, targeting early-stage technology companies for the future of consumption. She also founded She Loves Tech, the world's largest startup competition for women in technology, which is in more than 30 international locations as of 2020. Virginia is the founder of Lean in China, a women's platform with over 100,000 members across more than 25 cities and 100 universities in China, which supports the goals and aspirations of Chinese women. Please welcome Virginia, and over to you.
Thank you very much. And I am delighted to introduce our panel today. First of all, we have Linda Zhang, founder and CEO, Purview Investments. Linda is the founder of Purview Investments, an advisory firm specializing in climate resilient, low carbon transition investing. She's a pioneer and fund manager for an industry award-winning low carbon transition exchange traded fund. She's dedicated her career in asset management as a fund manager and business executive in financial institutions such as BlackRock and Charles Schwab. She is also co-founder and a board member of Global Industry Association Women in ETFs. Next, we have Sherry Nursalim, Vice Chairman of GT Group. Sherry Nursalim is Vice Chairman of GT Group, a diversified group with real estate development, manufacturing, consumer lifestyle presence, partnering with world-renowned brands across the Asia-Pacific region. She's also the Vice Chairman of the International Chamber of Commerce and a group member of Publicis Group, Imagine, the Business and Sustainable Development Commission Global Blended Finance Task Force, and Partnering for Green Growth. She also chairs the Southeast Asia chapter of the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network. And finally, we have Deborah Lay, Vice Chair and Executive Director of the Paulson Institute. Deborah is the Vice Chairman and Executive Director of the Paulson Institute. In that capacity, she advises the chairman on US-China relations, as well as oversees the development and implementation of Paulson Institute programs and initiatives. In addition, she manages the Green Finance Center for the Paulson Institute. So I'm honored to have these incredible industry leaders sitting at the forefront of global decarbonization efforts. And before I kick off the panel, I wanted to say, when I first started my venture capital fund 6 years ago, climate was very much a concept, let alone a catchword. And today, being a very heavy investor in food, agriculture, the circular economy, and retail, climate implications are not something that any of us as investors can actually ignore anymore. In fact, I think earlier today, CNN published that the World Meteorological Organization just announced that we are very, very likely in the years in 2023 to 2027 to be breaching the 1.5 degree temperature threshold. There's a 98% likelihood for this 5-year period will be the warmest in record for the planet, and will be the clearest signal of how climate change is accelerating. The 1.5 degree threshold is actually seen as the tipping point for us, after which it's going to be very, very hard to come back. And given that urgency and that context, I think today the panel will really explore, what we can do in our roles as executives in the business world, as policymakers, and as investors, trying to push towards, decarbonization and climate neutral impact. So what I wanted to do is basically, delve into a little bit into each of the work that each of these amazing leaders are doing, and then to talk a little bit more about how US, China, and global sort of relations can play a part in these decarbonization efforts. So Linda, let's start with you. Perhaps I'd love for you to share your experience managing a low carbon ETF fund. And I think, and the global context and the backdrop of that, to share a little bit more about how, US and China and their efforts towards net zero, and to really share how US and China are really leading, respectively in areas such as EV or high-speed rail.
All right. Good evening, or should I say good morning, Virginia? Can you hear me? You can see me, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, good, good. I understand you're not based in New York City. I just listening to, before I dive into US-China, who is leading where, but let me just to say thank you for inviting me to China Project Annual Women Conference event. It's such a pleasure listening to all the previous panelists. And I can certainly concur, Virginia, when you said 7 years ago, when you started your own climate-related projects, it was considered a novelty. I think I can say that regarding the low carbon investment research and the fund I started, when I started Purview a few years ago. The exchange traded fund industry is 7 trillion, it's pretty large. 7 trillion in asset under management, representing about almost over 20% of all the assets under management in the US market. This is sizable. There's a lot of capital tied into investments in public markets. Yet most of these funds continue to invest in, carbon heavy, pretty polluting, environmental damaging companies. So when I started Purview, I thought, why don't we look at which companies are helping changing that? Low carbon, many countries have committed, many governments have committed net zero emission by 2050. So what that means is many companies in various sectors have to find a new way, a low carbon way to manufacture their products and providing their services. And, this literally touch all sectors. So if you look at where the emissions coming from, it really comes from energy, transportation, housing, agriculture, and industry. So net zero transition by 2050, it really means companies involved in those sectors have to find a new way to conduct business. And to me, to Purview, this represents a huge investment opportunities of investing in these leaders in low carbon transition process. So in terms of US and China, interestingly, you would find by far many of the leaders in green tech, green transportation, green energy, they happen to be in China and in the US. So for net zero by 2050 to be true, US and China are huge players. And just in terms of who is leading where, I don't like to frame this as a competition, but rather, I think too many issues and policies are wrongfully framed in these zero-sum competitive, even unfriendly terms. What I would like to say is, let's look at where the capitals are, where the technologies are, where the leaders are. In terms of green energy, China by far leads in terms of total capacity. So it leads by US by 2/3. So US total renewable energy capacity is only 1/3 of China right now. And in terms of that gap is likely going to increase even further. And in terms of transportation, China also lead by far in terms of green EV, electric vehicles. Half of all electric vehicles are actually running in China right now. And almost 95% of electric buses in the world are also running in Chinese cities. And also China has by far the most electric-based bullet train, much more than the rest of the world combined. So I think in terms of renewable energy and transportation, China currently lead. And in terms of, so China policy-wise is committed to 2030 and 2060, which means a carbon peak by 2030 and carbon neutral by 2060. And right now, China seems to be on track to do that. And US, the government has been slow in making major commitment, but since Biden's administration has certainly passed CHIPS Act and more recently Inflation Reduction Act, that's going to introduce $400 billion investment into renewable projects over the next decades. I think those are very helpful. So when US government lacks, US businesses are coming up. More than 400 companies have signed a pledge of net zero transition by 2040, some by 2050. So let me
Thank you,
stop
Linda.
here. Mhm.
Thank you, Linda. And I think we will go back to the whole point about US-China collaboration versus competition, sort of towards the end of the panel. I turn my attention to Sherry, also a great friend and mentor who I've had a lot of pleasure working with. Sherry, you work very closely with the Indonesian government as a climate envoy, as well as have experience with numerous sort of climate technology startups in the Southeast Asian region, which you often showcase at your flagship forum, Trihita Karuna Forum. I've also had the pleasure of attending that many, many times. I think, your experience, literally being a pioneer in this space, from the time I've known you, 5 years ago, when nobody else was really talking or caring about it, actually shows the outsized role that Southeast Asia as a region can play in the global decarbonization market. Sherry, perhaps you could, share some of your experiences in building up, this movement and being effective in influencing policy and business, towards this goal. You're on mute, Sherry. You're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Virginia. It's an honor to be on this panel and among illustrious women leaders. You showed, when you introduced me, you had me sitting with Peggy Delaney. She was the founder of Synagogues. She was one of those who inspired me in a lot of these journeys. So for women, often you have mentors and someone who guides you or inspire you. So she was someone who has been doing tri-sector collaboration. She's from the Rockefeller family, and she started, we worked together on this global philanthropy circle also. And so working with many families around the world, she's inspiring us to look beyond just the businesses, because we come from a business family, and working with the tri-sectors, but for what cause? And you mentioned about our forum, Trihita Karana. So I think a lot of people may not know what is Trihita Karana. It's a Balinese phrase. It's a Sanskrit. So tri is the number 3, hita is happiness, and karana is the way. So the 3 ways to happiness. So what are the 3 ways to happiness that the Balinese believe? They believe that first is the harmony of people with people, social harmony. Second is the harmony of people with the planet, so ecological harmony. And last is the harmony of people with the spiritual. So we are all spiritual beings, and we, whether it's in a God, those who have a belief in God, but there's also for those who can believe in that there is a spiritual side of it. So whether collaboration, peace, partnership, to me, those are all values that are linked to the spirit. So for us, we found that a really beautiful philosophy. It's indigenous, but then we realized in Chinese there's 天地人和, 天人合一. It's all aligned, and Pope Francis also wrote about the Laudato Si. And in Islam, there's a similar values and cultures. As we talk about climate, and we we realized that actually our ancestors, the indigenous communities, they actually knew what was the priority already. And they pursue their lifestyle, they pursue a lot of the work they do, and the way they also, the women, the indigenous women. One of our belief is that in order to change, you have to start with the people and the individuals. And we realize looking, I mean, I think, you know, I want to mention the movie Avatar in a way, because I was just met with Jim and Susie Cameron, and you know, they were sharing that they were inspired by the Kecak dance of the Balinese on the healing circle of the Avatar. And actually, it's a lot about the priorities. And I think if we, and I do feel the women do have some, we are different other than the physical. And there are certain things where, you know, perhaps it's evolution, you know, to make sure that, you know, the social harmony, you know, and also the listening to the voices that are unheard. You know, these are values and attributes that are very needed. So when we started the Trita Karana Forum and also our United in Diversity Foundation, we wanted to create create a sort of a collective courage of individuals who would do something together. And our work, we are also partnering, we have partnered with MIT for almost 3 decades, but and also with Tsinghua University, we have founded a Tsinghua Southeast Asia Center in Bali. And we feel that the world can learn from Bali, and likewise, Bali also needs to understand and work with the world, especially on the technology, especially on blended financing, especially on tri-sector and capacity building. That part, I think we can, the world can learn together in that hub. And we are working at the G20 last year in Bali. So I think we were lucky that it was a hard work of the Indonesian government and very impressive leadership as well as teamwork all the way down. And I really believe there were prayers in Bali, you know, there were every 1,700 the priest in Bali, and then 150,000 Zoom in. So talking about technology, you had this, I was joining one of these prayer sessions for the G20 so that it will be a successful and smooth event. When everyone in that one place is hoping for success and, you know, praying for it, you know, it was amazingly a difficult year, but it was successful. And one of the key outcomes was energy transition. So 20 billion was committed from the US, Japan, IPG, G7 countries, and many others, as well as GFANS, which is the business side of, I think that was Mark Carney and a lot of business community, Mary Shapiro and others. So 20 billion was committed to support energy transition for Indonesia. And actually there was a lot more, there was over $70 billion that were announced. So I think we realized that we need financing to move. We need people and technology. And so I think we're also working a lot on the technology side. So Happy Digital X, HDX is the program that we have worked with Tsinghua University, as well as led with faculty, but also MIT professors. So we have a big data program that has been very successful, that included climate solutions, that satellite traceable technology. That was the first, and oceans based, as well as it was featured in COP and G20. So this company is now a new startup. So I think, we work with indigenous community. So Pakat Foundation supported also this McCall Indigenous and Grassroots Leadership Program. And I think we're also working on this natural capital, communities, and carbon program, where we believe that it's not just the carbon. We have to also look at the natural capital as well as the communities, so that it is really centered around the values of the Trita Karanao Tiandiren. And so I think we connect with you, Virgie, and you have supported one of our fellows, MIT fellows, and I think we have a lot of women climate and integrators and champions who I think can benefit from work like your work, like Teja.
Thank you,
She
Sherry.
Loves Tech. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sherry. I was at the G20 with you last year. And I think one of the most impressive things that I've ever seen out of a G20 is a developing country's leadership of a global agenda. And, what was very, very clear was all key ministries of the Indonesian government, were united by a common agenda of energy transition, one of three big sort of national priorities, being pushed at the G20. And as a technology investor, often on the ground, I spend more than half my time in Indonesia. I'm actually seeing how this is actually, from a policy perspective, from a subsidy perspective, really being pushed through with great force, even sometimes I think even faster than my home country of Singapore, in mobility, in transport. And that's also impacting the appetites of investors like myself. We will circle back a little bit more later to the Trihita Karana Forum and some of the blended finance initiatives under that, because I think we've achieved a lot with that over the last 5 years in terms of investment opportunities. But I'd like to turn to Deborah, Vice Chair of the Paulson Institute. During our sort of pre-preparation session, there were some very, very interesting themes on the trends of economic nationalism and climate policy. And I loved, what, the terms climate competition versus climate collaboration. I think competition can be quite healthy. Like I said, seeing developing countries step up in ways, I was completely blown away by what Indonesia was proposing, given that they're a huge custodian of our oceans and marine assets. And for them to be setting policy instead of following that, was very impressive to me. So Deborah, please, could you share a little bit more about what you see in terms of economic nationalism in terms of climate?
Great. Well, thank you so much. I'm just delighted and honored to be back at the SupChina Women's event again, and always with such incredible people. And I was really struck by the conversation about the G20 because we were working very closely with China when they hosted the G20. And I was with Zhou Xiaochuan actually last month, and we were reminiscing that at the time, when they went in and they were talking to the Chinese bankers and others in the financial sector, they were saying, what are you talking about, green finance? Basically, what is that? And why is China making this a priority? And today, to see how far it's come, it's really incredible. And to see the United States and China working together to be hosting under the context of the G20, the Sustainable Working Group, to see all the good work that Indonesia has done. And certainly as the Paulson Institute, we care tremendously about biodiversity and to put that on the agenda. And we've done a lot of work about financing nature. But what we've seen too in Virginia, as you were referencing this, with this rise and this importance of cooperation, is also a rise in protectionism, not just around trade as we have seen it traditionally, but trade now as we see it in climate, and how carbon is viewed in many ways as a commodity. And these protectionist sentiments are coming out as we start to look at competition around solar panels, EVs, batteries, and it sometimes laps over into national security concerns. If you listen to some of the debates happening in the United States, even the New York Times today did a whole article on the supply chain for EVs and how we're totally reliant on China and how long it would be before the United States could even compete. And it's looking at, if you look at the actions that Europe is taking with a carbon border adjustment tax and how they're going to use carbon as a means to take almost punish countries who are not able to reach the same kind of standards that the EU is able to do when it comes to the energy transition. And I think it's something that policymakers are going to have to be very mindful of, because it's something where we all agree we need to work together. And certainly there's an urgency of that. And at a government to government level, they do. Virginia, I completely agree with you that competition is important. We need it to bring out the best in us, but we also need to manage that competition. And so it isn't done in a way that is protectionist, but instead that we're thinking creatively about how we can use competition to benefit and help reach the policy goals around climate change and biodiversity. And for example, one of the things that we're very supportive of is the idea of creating free trade zones where there are no tariffs on environmental goods and services. This is something that was attempted in the World Trade Organization. They weren't able to get very far, but you could see a group of countries coming together. China could take a lead in this, the United States could take the lead in this, and start putting together subsets of groups to really create and spur the trade. And as all of you have talked about, there is a lot of money out there looking to be investing in climate solutions these days. I work with TPG very closely, and we talk about the climate boom of what is coming with all this money coming from the United States, from China, from Europe, that is seeking solutions. All these companies that have to meet their net zero obligations, but they're not able to find ways to do it. So they're investing in funds like yours, Virginia, to help them get there, to meet those goals. And it's really going to be an interesting time to see the rise in this industry, but we need to really be thinking about how we create healthy competition as part of it.
Looked at Deborah. You know, I just spent my morning today talking to a new sort of change. I looked at 8 such companies like this, you know, around the carbon economy in Southeast Asia alone. And like I said, you know, healthy competition is great. Also, a lot of duplication and a lot of over inflated assets, because that's what the carbon economy is today. You know, overinflated because everybody's sort of trying to get into these assets. So you know that is a privilege of my job, but at the same time to really try to understand you know what is sustainable, and you know, Deborah, you know, you talked about carbon being used as a lever, you know, almost as like a what's the word? You know, I can't think of the right word, but carbon being used as a hostage, almost in cross-border sort of negotiations. How have you seen that?
Well, we see it it play out in many interesting ways. For example, one is looking at China and the ETF that they've set up, right, and the carbon exchange. Just with one industry, they've managed to bring 45% maybe arguably of China's carbon emissions under a trading scheme, but it's 15% of the world. If they put the rest of their polluting industries under that one exchange, they could be bringing essentially 50%, give or take, of world's emissions under their trading scheme, setting at their standards. And that then becomes, right, an opportunity that China controls. If we look at it in the context, as I was saying, of Europe, if they're setting up a carbon border adjustment tax, then it's going to be very difficult on countries, whether it would, particularly maybe some of those in Africa who aren't able to spend the money, but to have an energy transition, but would rely on the Europeans as an export market. They are going to be competitively disadvantaged in the market when that's applied. In the United States, we're looking at domestic content rules as a part of the IRA. So either we're going to have preferential rates for domestic US companies, or we're going to be having European, Chinese, well, Chinese unfortunately won't qualify for the IRA, but having other countries come establish here. So they won't be in their own domestic market. You know, that's an irritant already in US-EU relations of how this becomes a benefit for European companies to come set up so they can take advantage of the IRA.
Great. So basically, rules for
Anti-competitive
climate,
measures, yes.
which essentially have become new types of tariffs, trade barriers, and greenwashing. Especially if you're putting, all kinds of companies under something which is meant to be green. I have a final question for all panelists, and it is, as we approach the end of this panel, I like, as we move towards, global decarbonization, what are, you think, one or two key opportunities when it comes to climate investing? I would like each panelist, to be super targeted in terms of what you think is that that best opportunity to achieve sort of climate change. Perhaps I'll start with Linda first.
Sure. There are definitely more than two, but we only have time for two. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, okay, I wasn't sure. Yeah, if I can only have time for two. So one of that, I would say the adoption of AI in climate solution. So one example is, City of Hangzhou, for example, has worked with Alibaba that developed this system for managed city traffic flow. I think the name is called City Brain. So not only it optimizes the green light duration, but also predicts peak traffic. So this both reduces congestion and also help reduce emission from traffic. So I think AI adoption, AI usage of AI in the climate solution should be becoming bigger and bigger, given more data that's available that AI can train itself. The second one, I would say, on the financing side, Deborah has mentioned cap and trade schemes in different markets. In exchange traded funds, there are actually several companies, ETF providers, who come out with a carbon allowance ETFs that based on the notion of the price of carbon allowances in both Europe and in California. And in China, unfortunately, the Shanghai exchange allowance exchange only started 2 summers ago, and now it's limited to power companies mostly. And hopefully it'll expand to other polluting industries. And I think that's those two areas I think will be pretty exciting for investors to watch.
Thank you so much, Linda. Sherry, I'd like you to address in particular, the concept of blended finance opportunities for climate change, something that you've been championing, ever since I met you. I think we may have lost Sherry temporarily. Maybe I'll go to Deborah first. Deborah, do you see any interesting cross-border type opportunities for climate change investment?
Well, I'd like to just go back to the biodiversity issue, since I know that the others were looking more at climate, and see that there's real opportunities in investing in natural capital and how we really look creatively. And this is where we do have to work very cooperatively with government at turning bees and bats and other pollinators into asset classes. And if we don't start to look at it that way, the impact that we'll have on our food supply, on our water, on our oceans, and the other things are going to be significant. So we have to find a way to turn that. And we've started to see some very interesting developments on that front. I know China actually has been doing a very good job, particularly around mangroves and conservation of mangroves, and turning that into then something that could be profitable in certain regions. And I think creative thinking of really smart financial people combined with government policy could make a really big difference.
Absolutely, Deborah. Thank you. And that's something, I'd love to learn more about, given that I do so much work investing in food and agriculture. So that's something I'm definitely going to be following up on you, in terms of understanding best practice in biodiversity investing. Sherry, are you back? I see you in the chat. Can you hear us, Sherry? Sure. Perhaps, I basically like to sort of wrap up, the panel. I also wanted to share one key piece of Sherry's work, since I'm also, pretty familiar with it. I think Sherry has been championing the concept of blended finance for climate change, which is a mix of public and private sector type financing. And that's actually what happened, when 5 years ago, when I started to understand Trihita Karana Forum, became actually a forum for really catalyzing governments, development banks, philanthropists, as well as private sector investors. And that actually gave rise to the first sort of one of the first green bonds actually issued, for Indonesia. And subsequently, I think, in the last, in the G20 and the Trihita Karana Corresponding Forum last November, I think together with BlackRock, they announced 30 billion sort of health and well-being fund for the planet there as well. Just another example of how, private and public sort of blended finance can achieve some of those outcomes. The other thing I also wanted to add, on behalf of Sherry, given my work and understanding of Indonesia, is I couldn't agree more with what she spoke about the community and the indigenous community. As a venture capitalist focusing on technology, the last thing you would actually think about is how you work with indigenous communities. But as I learn and I go deeper into the carbon economy and understanding real verification methods, because without real verification, basically any type of carbon accounting offset is fraud. And I started to realize that the most impactful and effective and truthful ways of actually carbon verification and accounting is through working closely with the local community. And the question is, how do you do that at scale? I think the role of investors and technologists is actually creating a new economic system which incentivizes people to decarbonize and to protect our planet, as opposed to cutting it down. And I'd like to thank all of the panelists today and all of our listeners today, for their time and their wonderful sharing. And thank you again, to the China Project and SupChina for inviting us today.
Well, thank you, Virginia, and thank you to all of those outstanding contributions from the panelists, and yet another really inspiring conversation. We're at time, and I'm going to hand it over to Anla to close out in just a moment, but I'd also just like to once again thank the China Project for giving us this platform. We started off saying we would be energized and inspired by one another, and I don't know, I'm going into my day in Shanghai. Many of you are ending your day in the United States feeling more enthusiastic, both personally, professionally, and just as a woman and global citizen who cares about, the future that we're shaping, to your point, Virginia, the way in which we try to create a more generative US-China relationship, and so much more. So thank you again for all of you who joined us and all of you who contributed your insights and your wisdom and for sharing so generously. And thank you, Anla, for bringing us together. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Mattie. I think you're really the best MC we've had, and especially from China. So I hope you'll join us again. I want to thank all you speakers because you have really inspired, and I feel so empowered. And this is why we do this every year, because you are experts and you see your world, and you took time to share with us your wisdom, your insights, and foresights of things to come. So thank you so much. I just wanted to say that tomorrow is our big gala. And for those of you who can attend, I know some of our speakers are attend, do not forget that it is a black tie. And for those of you who have not had a chance to join our gala, please save the date for next year. We will be alerting you very shortly. I also want to mention that, as I mentioned earlier at the beginning of our talk, that please take a look at our website and sign up for our Access, our Edge, and our Pro subscriptions. Finally, I want to thank our wonderful sponsors that have made it possible for today, and they include FD Gallery, Deloitte, Pillsbury, Freepoint, EY, Dorsey, Cartier, Evergreen, BYD, KCY, Kingdom Capital, UHY, Crescent Ridge, GCN, JP Morgan, and Walter and Shirley Wong Foundation. Thank you so much again. And I want to say that, we are really experiencing Zoom fatigue because we had almost 500 people sign up. up, and the numbers have fallen off. However, please be warned that we have 2 million followers. Our Zoom recording will be on our website, and we hope to have many, many people sign on and listen to all you brilliant people out there. So thank you so much again for all of you from everywhere, West Coast, Europe, and Virginia. A special thanks to you because I know it's 3 a.m. your time now, and you've changed your schedule to join us today. So I want to say thank you again. And Mattie, you're in China, and many of you are in China as well, in California. So I want to wish you a wonderful day and good night to all of you. See you tomorrow for those who will be there. And thanks again.